I've been living in that house since I was 2 years old, so the noises I heard coming from the attic weren't strange to me. When I was little, my mum would tell me fairies were living there to watch over us. If I was really bad, they'd come and take me, and I would have to live with them forever. I know she was trying to frighten me, but I don't think she actually realised how much it did scare me. I used to have a recurring nightmare of some unseen force taking me out of bed and putting me in a burlap sack. I could feel every bump as they dragged me up those attic stairs. It felt so real. Then I would wake up in my bed, and it would be morning. I was too terrified to get out of bed at night, but every now and then I would hear footsteps and think they were coming for me and sprint as fast as I could to my parents' room. One of my earliest memories was me diving into their bed after hearing something moving around up there in the middle of the night. I would make my dad check every inch of that house, especially the attic door, before I'd go to bed. I was always afraid he would forget to put the chains back on after feeding them. I used to hide under the covers with my mother's arm wrapped around me. She used to sing to me, and I would usually be asleep by the time he returned. She had such a soothing voice. I always believed nothing could ever harm me as long as I was in her arms. She was so calm, no matter what happened. I can't remember one time she raised her voice to me, not even when I tried to wash her new car with paint thinner I'd found in the shed. My dad wasn't as calm as my mum, but he never shouted at me. He believed communication was the key to any good relationship, so whenever I got in trouble, he would sit me down and explain everything to me in a way that I could understand. I always respected him for that, and I suppose it worked. I was polite and respectful. They never had any of the neighbours call to complain about me. I might have 1 or 2 mishaps at school over the years, but I never got taken to the principal's office or anything like that. Plus, I had good grades, so I think they must have been happy with me. The town I live in is small with less than 1,000 people, but we are a very tight-knit community. Everyone knows everyone and we all look out for each other. It's one of the safest places in the country to raise a child, my dad keeps telling me. The sheriff lives 3 houses up, my dad's best friend since childhood. Tony lives across the street from us. My teacher lives in the next block. It doesn't make sense how my parents managed to hide a child in the attic all these years without someone finding out. Our next-door neighbour, Mrs. Henson, went on a date with a guy she met on Facebook a few years back while her husband was at a bar. The whole town knew about it before she even got out of the restaurant, even though it happened 2 towns over. That's the thing about small towns. Everyone knows your business. So how did my parents get away with it for so long? Looking back, I probably should have noticed something was up, the constant scratching, the crying, the chained door. Then there was the feeding bucket. I guess when you're a kid you will believe anything your parents tell you. If you can't trust them, who can you trust? By the time I stopped believing in fairies, my parents had me convinced the raccoons were living up there, and my dad was treating them for rabies. I don't know how I believed them, it sounds so stupid now. But it worked. I never went near the attic. I did ask them once why my dad didn't just call an exterminator. My mum told me if they did, they would have to get put to sleep, and she said every creature should get a second chance, no matter how sick they are. I don't know if my dad felt the same. I would hear him pacing up and down the hallway upstairs every night before feeding time. My mum and I used to wait in the kitchen. The steps to the attic were directly over us, so I would often hear weird noises when he opened the door. My mum would try to hide it by putting on music. The weird thing about it is, they were some of the happiest memories. We would always be singing and dancing until my dad came back and called my mum into the other room. His eyes were always red and bloodshot. He told me it was because of the attic insulation, but sometimes I'd put my ear up to the door and listen in, and I was sure I could hear him sobbing. I first started to get suspicious about it a year ago. It was my dad's birthday and he'd had a bit too much to drink and forgotten to lock the attic door. I only noticed when I got up to the toilet. I tried to warn him, but he was out cold on the couch. I didn't want to wake my mum, so I went back to bed. A while later, I was awoken by a weird noise, but I thought it came from the attic, so I didn't think anything of it and tried to go back to sleep. Before I got a chance to close my eyes, I heard a thud. It sounded like it came from the end of the bed, so I got a fright and jumped up. Staring into the darkness, I could just about make out a shadowy figure rocking over and back in the corner. The noise was coming from them, banging their head against the wall as they swayed back and forth repeatedly. First, I thought it was my dad. He was very drunk that night. He was a bit of a lightweight. We once found him asleep in the bathtub wrapped in a towel because he couldn't make it to his room. "Dad? Is that you?" I whispered. But he didn't answer. Frustrated, I blurted out, "Dad, for God's sake, will you answer me?" Suddenly the thuds started to become louder and closer together. That's when I realized it wasn't my dad. I could feel the blood rushing to my head and my heart started jumping to the beat. Thud, 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 thud of his head hitting the wall. I wanted to shout out for help, but I was breathing so heavily I thought I was going to faint. Then it just stopped, and the only sound I could hear apart from my racing heart was the intense, shallow breathing coming from whoever was standing at the end of my bed. As I watched him slowly turn toward me, there was a moment where I thought I was going to die. I couldn't feel my heart anymore. I'm fairly sure my life flashed before my eyes. I then heard him shout, "Josh!" before laughing manically. I will tell you this, I screamed louder than I have ever screamed in my whole life. I wouldn't be surprised if I woke the whole town. I don't remember much after that. I may have just passed out. I don't know how my parents kept doing this, but they were able to convince me it was all a dream, and I believed them even when I found a head-shaped dint in my wall. I guess they were my parents, and I never expected them to lie to me, but the veil had been lifted and I started to notice every little noise that came from the attic, and it scared the hell out of me. The following months were tough. I hated going to bed, and by then I was too old to run into the safety of my mother's arms, so I hid under the covers every night in case the thing came back. It took a long time, but eventually I began to recover, and things started to go back to normal, if only for a short time. I don't know why my mum and dad kept this from me for so long. They must have known I would find out sooner or later. They probably thought it would scare me and wanted to wait a bit until I was older. But they were wrong. Nothing could have scared me as much as it did that night. My dad had a few too many again and ended up falling asleep on the couch. To be fair to him, he wasn't always like that. I guess keeping a secret that big took its toll on him. I didn't even notice the attic door was unlocked when I went to bed. I was probably too tired from staying up late the night before on the PlayStation. So, by the time my head hit the pillow, I was out cold. I don't know how long after it was, but something woke me. I heard, Josh, please wake up." I was after coming out of a deep sleep and I could barely keep my eyes open, so I thought I was dreaming and pulled the covers over my head. I then felt a hand on my shoulder. "Josh, please, we're running out of time." When I turned around, I saw that shadowy figure standing over me again. I freaked out and screamed uncontrollably. Moments later, my dad rushed into my room and turned on the light. That's when I saw its face, and it terrified me. My dad put a sack over his head and had him dragged out of there in seconds. The only thing he said to me was, "Did he touch you?" But I was in shock and couldn't answer, so he locked me in my room. It was the next morning before he came back. By then I'd started to come around and wanted answers. He didn't walk in right away like he usually would. Instead, he knocked. "Josh," my dad said, "I need your answer to this question truthfully. Can you do that?" "Dad, why am I locked in here? What's happening?" I replied nervously. "Josh!" he shouted. That was the first time I ever heard him talk like that to me, so I got frightened and started to cry. "Josh, just listen," he said this time in a calmer tone. "Everything will be okay, son. Just answer the question, please." I blurted out, "No, Dad, he didn't touch me. Why? Did I do something wrong?" "No, son, you did good," he replied as he let out a sigh of relief. Then he walked away, and I heard nothing from him for hours. When he came back, Mum was with him. She had a burger and fries which she left down on the bed beside me. I knew things were bad when she couldn't even look me in the eye. When I asked them what was wrong, they seemed to struggle to get words out. They were usually very vocal, so it was weird to see them like that. When they eventually started explaining what was going on, it shocked me to my core. They told me I had a brother that they kept locked in the attic all these years. I didn't know what to say, but it did explain what I saw that night and why the shadowy figure looked so much like me. They said he was born with a dangerous condition, and they had to lock him in the attic to keep everyone safe. But they assured me it was okay as long as I didn't have any contact with him. When I asked why they didn't just take him to the hospital to get help, they told me it wasn't that kind of sickness. I must have had a million questions to ask them, but I think it was too much to process at the time, so I just got angry with them and told them I'd never wanted to talk to them again. I don't know if I could ever trust them after what they did. What else are they lying about? And what about my poor brother? They're monsters. How could they keep anyone locked away like that, especially their own flesh and blood? Will they do the same to me someday? What's worse? I know my brother's locked in there, alone and scared. I really want to help him, but I'm worried they might be telling the truth and he is sick. Then I would only make things worse. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to support this channel, we have a link in the description for that. Don't forget to give a subscribe, a like, and press the bell to get notifications. Tell us your thoughts in the comments section. You can also send us your real or fictional horror stories.